A Texas traffic stop just blew a six-figure hole in the cartel ammo pipeline. One cartel mule's loose lips might have saved Smith and Wesson millions and torched Mexico's latest courtroom stunt. But what caliber was he moving? And why did the Supreme Court just side with gun owners over a foreign government? In this video, we'll talk about how a one-man ammo run exposed a 120,000-round stockpile, why the Supreme Court tossed Mexico's blame game lawsuit, and how the real villains aren't gun makers, but the people running a narco state right next door. Picture the border at dawn. Border Patrol lights cut through the dust, an unremarkable sedan sits on the shoulder, and inside the trunk are sealed cases packed with shiny brass .223 cartridges. The driver is 20-year-old Charbel Garza Macias, an illegal alien from Nuevo Laredo who thinks 4,800 rounds is no big deal, because he's made this run before. Agents ask a few simple questions, and the kid folds faster than wet cardboard. Within minutes, he confesses the ammo isn't for weekend hog hunts. It's the latest drip in a steady river feeding Cartel Del Noreste across the Rio Grande. He even drops a warehouse address where 90-plus cases sit shrink-wrapped and waiting. Add his prior purchases, and the tally slams past 120,000 rounds of .556. That single confession matches Homeland Security's long-running estimates of how cartels move about 50,000 guns and tens of millions of rounds every year. They don't haul tractor-trailers full of crates. They chip away, road trip after road trip, a few thousand rounds at a time, concealed in door panels, roof liners, and baby strollers. Macias's preferred hiding place was the headliner of a tired minivan. Pop the trim, slide in flattened ammo boxes, slap the plastic back, and the passenger cabin looks like every other family hauler rolling toward Eagle Pass. Luck ran out, mouth opened up, and suddenly, federal prosecutors had the perfect living exhibit for the Supreme Court. See, only weeks earlier, Mexico had begged SCOTUS to resurrect its civil suit against Smith and Wesson. The Mexican government insisted cartel massacres are basically a marketing problem created by American gun companies. Smith & Wesson sells ARs, cartels use ARs, therefore Smith & Wesson must pay. Nice try. The court declined to hear the appeal, letting the lower ruling stand and leaving Mexico's lawyers holding nothing but photocopied press clippings. Enter the Macias arrest. The evidence couldn't be clearer. The ammunition was bought in ordinary Texas sporting goods stores by straw purchasers, handed to an underling of CDN, and earmarked for full-auto AR-15s already on the Mexican side. Smith & Wesson wasn't anywhere near that transaction. Neither were Colt, Ruger, or Daniel Defense. The only organized structure in the chain was Cartel Del Noreste, a brutal offshoot of the old Los Zetas, now run by Juan Gerardo Huevo Trevino Chavez. Trevino, by the way, is no back-alley kingpin hiding in the jungle. He was born in Laredo, Texas. He flips between English and Spanish like a border radio DJ and treats the I-35 corridor as his personal supply ramp. 2 months ago, federal agents finally grabbed him in San Diego after years of cat and mouse. His indictment lists 11 ugly counts: meth, coke, marijuana, money laundering, recruiting kids for drug runs, possessing machine guns, all of it. But the charge that stitches him to Macias is conspiracy to possess firearms in furtherance of drug trafficking, precisely the pipeline Border Patrol just yanked into the daylight. When you map Macias's ammo to Trevino's order sheet, you watch the narrative assemble itself. A low-level runner buys a few cases at Academy Sports, another buys some at Cabela's, a third picks up pallets from a neighborhood pawn shop. They meet in a warehouse, repackage, and drip the goods south. Each trip is small enough to look like a hobbyist's buy, but large enough to rearm a Sicario squad. Multiply by hundreds of runners, and you get the totals Border Patrol keeps whispering about: 50,000 guns and at least 10 million rounds a year sliding under the radar. Now, ask yourself why 223/556 is the flavor of choice. Cartels learned the same lesson every modern military did. Lightweight ammo means fighters carry more. Recoil is mild enough for marginally trained shooters to stay on target, and an AR can be tuned, rebuilt, or chopped into a pistol in a back-alley machine shop. You can sling one under a jacket, stuff another under a pickup seat, and keep a third in a rooftop Overwatch bag. With a proper barrel and good glass, a Sicario can reach past 300 meters, swap to a 10-inch barrel, and the rifle folds into a backpack. Flexibility sells more than any marketing slogan ever could. Sure, they still hoard the old Soviet 7.62 by 39 for their SKSs and AKs, And every street lieutenant has a 9mm Glock tucked in his waistband, but 5.56 is king once bullets start flying between the concrete columns. Want proof? Scroll cartel telegram channels. You'll spot M4 carbines with EO techs, cheap AR pistols with drum mags, and piles of steel-cased .223 dumped on dirt floors next to kilos of meth. It's modern warfare on a civilian budget, and it's exactly why Mexico tried to pin the blame on an American rifle maker instead of cleaning its own barracks. Legal civilian gun ownership in Mexico is a bureaucratic nightmare. There is one gun store in the entire nation, guarded by soldiers inside a military base in Mexico City. Paperwork crawls for months. Caliber choices are neutered. Meanwhile, police armories leak like sieves. Between 2003 and 2009, roughly 1 out of every 8 soldiers walked away from the Mexican army, often with their rifles slung under a poncho. Couple that with nearly 9,000 police weapons listed as missing, and you've got an internal supply problem so big it could outfit its own infantry brigade. Add to that the weapons streaming in from Central America, leftovers of a dozen civil wars, plus Balkan surplus AKs shipped through the same containers that haul cocaine, and you get a smorgasbord of hardware that never set foot in an American gun store. Yet Mexico's foreign ministry filed a complaint claiming Smith and Wesson logos magically forced their way south. The Supreme Court saw the stunt for what it was, a money grab wearing a moral mask. They punted the suit, and within days, Macias's arrest provided real-world confirmation of their reasoning. Let's talk tracing, because the numbers Mexico waves around are cooked harder than street vendor chicharrones. U.S. traces run through the ATF's e-trace system, which only works if a gun was manufactured or imported here, and still carries a legible serial number and maker's mark. Mexican officials are instructed to send only guns likely of U.S. origin. Surprise, the percentage that come back from the U.S. looks high, but that slice represents a tiny sample of total seizures. Inspector General audits admit the real share could be as low as 12%. The American side isn't innocent either. Project Gunrunner and the infamous Operation Fast and Furious proved that bureaucrats can be just as reckless as narcos. Agents greenlit straw purchases, let the guns walk, then lost track of them until one turned up at a crime scene in Sonora or in the Arizona desert next to a murdered Border Patrol agent. That fiasco alone should have taught politicians to fix agencies before suing private companies that follow the law. Meanwhile, cartels adapt faster than any task force. They 3D print Glock frames, mill auto sears on hobby CNCs, and import Chinese drum mags by the pallet. You can ban every semi-auto rifle tomorrow, and by next week, Trevino's boys will be packing select-fire short-barreled ARs built from parts kits smuggled in under lawnmower shipments. Ammo, though, remains the bottleneck. Without powder and primers, you're just swinging a club. That's why the Macias stockpile matters. 120,000 rounds is a giant middle finger to anyone claiming the supply chain is purely domestic or easily regulated. Critics claimed the justices ducked the substance of Mexico's complaint, but denial sometimes screams louder than a written opinion. It told every lower court the statute has teeth. The judges didn't need a 30-page lecture. They relied on the lower ruling's plain reading of the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. Extend liability through a criminal chain, and you might as well sue Ford because cartel gunmen rode to a massacre in an F-150. Mexico's counsel actually heard that comparison from the district judge and still pressed on. Corporate social responsibility looks great in an annual report, but tort law rests on proximate cause. Macias's trip to Academy Sports and Trevino's order to move brass south inserted criminal intent between manufacturer and crime scene, add straw buyers, corrupt border agents, and stash house supervisors, and causation disintegrates faster than cheap powder in a monsoon. Try counting every decision, every bribe, every steering correction on Highway 83, then pin the homicide at the end of that chain on a factory in Massachusetts. Even first-year law students laughed. Border Patrol intel units chart similar microshipments every day. One intercept captured a Dodge Grand Caravan with its third-row seat ripped out and replaced with a plywood box, this time loaded with 35,000 rounds of Armenian import .223. Another bust involved a U-Haul trailer disguised as a mobile jump house rental and packed with Soviet-pattern ball ammo. These aren't isolated stunts. They're the cargo van equivalent of a scheduled airline. Yet advocates fixate on retail storefronts in the U.S., as if a clerk can divinely intuit a straw buyer's secret employer. Firearms dealers already flag suspicious transactions, call the ATF hotline, and refuse sales more often than activists admit. But put yourself in that cashier's shoes. A smiling 21-year-old presents ID, passes NICS, and pays cash for 2 cases of PMC bronze. No federal law caps how many boxes of ammo a free citizen may purchase. The sale proceeds, and unless the buyer blabs, nobody in that store will ever know those rounds will rain over Nuevo Laredo next week. Speaking of slight, Mexican officials love to mention their single gun store, but skip the part where their constitution technically guarantees the right to own a firearm. The government buried that right under layers of paperwork until it's a privilege for the well-connected. Meanwhile, cartel killers cruise the suburbs armed with belt-fed Brownings salvaged from old military stockpiles. Spare me the outrage theater. Numbers mislead unless we grasp scale. A modern narco cell of 20 fighters rotating across safe houses needs an AR, 2 spare uppers, a Glock, and a vest apiece. Then 1,000 rounds per month for training, intimidation shoots, and firefights. That cell alone burns 12,000 rounds annually. Multiply by hundreds of cells across Tamaulipas, Jalisco, Sonora, and Guerrero, and Machias's 120,000 rounds barely covers a week of regional demand. One point deserves more airtime: the caliber's symbolism. 5.56 is America's service cartridge, and cartels parade U.S. pattern rifles because optics matter. Brandishing the same caliber as the Marines project's power, Sicarios film takedowns in 4K, bolt an EOTech atop the rail, and spread the footage across Telegram claiming invincibility. That psychological edge can't be replicated with an old Mauser in obscure calibers. So, when Mexico attacked Smith Wesson, it was really attacking the image of American firepower. Americans saw the ploy for what it was: a government failing to police its own ranks and scapegoating the neighbor with strict export laws. Under ITAR, every exportable rifle requires State Department approval. Try shipping one M and P15 lower to Canada without paperwork, and federal agents will appear on your porch. Meanwhile, Mexican arms convoys disappear, only to reappear in cartel stockpiles. If blame were a GPS tag, it wouldn't ping in Springfield, Massachusetts. Before we wrap, imagine if the court had indulged Mexico. Plaintiffs' lawyers would subpoena marketing emails, twist product photos into claims of intent to supply terrorists, and open discovery fishing expeditions into every innovation that makes modern sporting rifles modular. Innovation would freeze, smaller firms would close, and none of it would scrape a single gang insignia off the streets of Reynosa. Smith & Wesson will keep making rifles because we Americans vote with our wallets. The company owes no apology for building reliable tools. The moral burden sits on the man who squeezes the trigger, whether he wears a sheriff's badge or a cartel necklace. That truth bothered Mexico's legal team because it points back at systemic corruption. Easier to blame a corporation than root out bribe-taking customs officers, rogue generals, and governors on cartel payrolls. The Stockpile photo should go in every civics textbook on personal responsibility. One kid, one trunk full of ammo, one chat log exposing a transnational racket. He did more to prove causation than 1,000 amicus briefs could achieve. So keep your irony meter calibrated. Every time a politician condemns civilian rifles yet poses with armed security, remember Trevino's crew roams with hardware stolen from those same security details. When the next lawsuit claims your polymer pistol encourages crime, ask where the data ends and the soundbite begins. Freedom carries risk. We accept it because the alternative is helplessness enforced by bureaucrats who lose 9,000 police weapons in a single decade. Do the homework: official dockets, GAO audits, declassified cables, and you'll reach the same conclusion the Supreme Court did. Fault stops at the finger that pulls the trigger, not at the factory that forged the steel. I'll leave you with this. If you're a lawful gun owner, keep your receipts, keep your powder dry, and keep calling out this nonsense. If you live near the border, drop your stories in the comments. I want to hear what you've seen. Stash houses, checkpoint drama, whatever the politicians ignore. Smash the like button so the algorithm knows free speech and the right to bear arms still matter. Share this video with that coworker who parrots the 90% myth. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and don't let the conversation die in silence. Without good people ready to defend what's theirs, the only ones left armed will be the cartels, and they're already buying all our ammo by the 100,000s.